think Nancy Cohen is one of the most important artists working in New Jersey now. I have been following her career probably for almost 20 years.
Nancy Cohen's exhibition of large-scale paper drawings at the Visual Arts Center of New Jersey is called Atlas of Impermanence.
Out of the 9 pieces, 6 of them are based on landscapes that have been changed by time and often by environmental conditions, and climate change.
The works resemble tapestries, but are made entirely from handmade paper and pulp. Her works in glass, called wings, fill the windows at each end of the gallery.
The overall series is called The Work of Time, and it's about places that have been changed by time and our relationship, and my personal relationship to those places.
One of those places is very close to Nancy's Jersey City home, exit 13 on the New Jersey Turnpike.
For the 30 years I've lived in New Jersey, I've had the experience that everybody has of driving up and down the New Jersey Turnpike and seeing that weird orange light flickering from around exit 13 and where all those power plants are, and thinking, what is that? Off of 13 is a drawing based on the orange light, the really bizarre, kind of almost space age looking architecture of those power plants, the oil tanks, which are pretty ubiquitous around this part of New Jersey that you can see actually when you're kayaking in lots of these waterways, the Hackensack and the Hudson. This part of New Jersey has been a disaster between Agent Orange and, Passaic and, all the, factories polluting the Hudson and the Hackensack. But there's also, the inspirational ways those waters have become cleaner over time. So there's this back and forth.
So she's always interested in how the environment has this sense of strength and lasting through time, but also being very challenged by human intervention.
It really started with water. When I was a kid, I grew up in Queens, so kind of near the river, and my grandparents lived on Long Beach, Long Island. They had a house on the beach, that's where they lived. And so I spent a lot of my young childhood on the ocean, and I never really thought of it as an influence. But over the years, whenever people would look at my work, they would see water references, and that at some point I started, taking that more seriously. I think very tactily. I think whether I'm working 2 or 3 dimensionally through materials. And so I started out in clay. The ability to manipulate it was really interesting to me. And the thing that I would get stuck on was what to do with it once it was fired. Like the application of color later didn't ever really make that much sense to me, I think intuitively. And so I've tended over the years to work with materials where I can join the color and the surface and the texture and the material all at the same time. When I started working in handmade paper, I could make the paper the color and the texture that I wanted before I started making the art out of it. And the same when I work with glass.
That's quite beautiful, and it makes you want to look at it and wonder, what is it that I'm looking at? They look like textiles with fabric and stitching.
I've been working in handmade paper for about 28 years, and I love the material, took to it right away because in many ways it was like working with clay, but it was lightweight, translucent. I loved it, absolutely loved it, and have then worked with it as one of many materials. Most of that time, primarily using it as a material for making sculpture and large-scale installations in handmade paper. And it's only about 7 years ago that I started primarily using it for making these large-scale paper wall pieces. So what I'm using right now is a combination of linen pulp and cotton pulp, so the same as linen and cotton fabric. And the way that you make paper is you start with, pulp in a lot of water, and then you make the sheets. So what I'm using to, what I call draw with, is the pulp before it's been made into paper.
This piece was inspired by salt flats in Bolivia. She was there visiting her 20-year-old son.
He was living in Bolivia in 2016 or 17, and I visited a few times, and one time we went to a place called Salar de Uyuni, which are the salt flats in Bolivia, and we spent a day wandering, but with a guide because they don't let you go alone because you would never find your way out of there because it's just this endless, landscape of sort of crusty hexagonal ground as far as you can see.
Another work deals with the landscape at Espiritu Santo National Park in Baja California.
It's called Espiritu Santo, which is the name of a national park in Baja. And I was there with this environmental group, Ninth Wave Global, and we were sleeping in the desert. It was really dry, cactus, dry. And we were hiking, we came up over a mountain and looked down, and there was the sea, and it was just when the tide was changing, and there was this incredible mixing of sand and water, and I felt like I was sort of looking at the spiral jetty. And so that was the mixing of sand and water in that moment really stayed with me. When I become interested in a place, I'm experiencing it visually, looking at it, walking around, hiking, and then reading about it, meeting with marine biologists, speaking, to people involved in the preservation and the restoration of the water, so all of that. So the work that I make is not a direct translation, but kind of an internal translation of all of that understanding.